Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the second edition of the Ground Floor Academy video series. My name is Tony LeBlanc. I will be your host today. Today we have the pleasure of welcoming Mike Currie to talk with us and spend some time and getting to know a little bit about his real estate investing journey, particularly into the multi-unit world and being a landlord and all the fun stuff that has to do with investing in real estate. So a quick intro about myself. Again, my name is Tony LeBlanc. I'm the owner and operator and founder of Ground Floor Property Management. So we're a property management firm based out of Moncton, New Brunswick, Canada. And also the founder of the Ground Floor Academy, which is basically an educational web series of discussions and chats with real estate investors across the country to learn about their stories, how they got involved with real estate, how they graduated from a certain class of properties to a different class, and everything in between. So today, again, we're really excited to have Mike on board. Mike's from Halifax, Nova Scotia, so he's not too far from myself, in a similar market as to what we're in here. So I'll let Mike introduce himself, and then we'll dive right into the call. So, Mike?
Yeah, my name's Mike Currie, and I'm from Halifax. And my real estate investment company is called the Fort Nova Group Limited, fortnovagroup.com. And I recently launched a educational company or division. It's called landlordbydesign.com. And we're doing I'm currently writing a book and whatnot.
Awesome.
And I also, as with many real estate investors, I have a day job. I'm general sales manager at Hillcross Volkswagen in Halifax here. So if you need a car or an apartment, you come and see me.
It's good to have those different spokes on the wheel, right? You do a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
I'm a huge VW fan. Like I said, I think I loved my tow rig when I had it.
Excellent.
Perfect. Well, thanks again, Mike. Appreciate you taking the time to be with us today. So, as we do traditionally in these video series, is kind of our starting point is diving into how you got into real estate, and then how did that eventually lead to that first purchase. I know in this business, real estate investors, there's so many people out there that are on the sidelines. There's a ton of people that would love to get into real estate, specifically in buying into rental properties, and they never do. We get that whole, analysis paralysis mode, and that hits a lot of people. So, there's not a lot of people that actually cross that road into actually buying and being a landlord and looking after properties. So maybe you can kind of let me, share with everybody how you got started, what was it about real estate and specifically multi-unit, rental properties that interest you? And let's kind of dive into your first deal and what that looked like.
Yeah, so basically, I'm not from a real estate family, but I've been interested in the landlord or property business pretty much my whole life. Now, my mother used to do some flipping of houses, so she used to buy houses, fix them up, and sell them.
Yeah.
So on Sundays for entertainment, we used to go out to a lot of open houses, that type of thing. So what that led me to do is get into sort of the home flipping. Like basically, I wouldn't say it was more like buying a house, living in it, renovating it, and then selling it. And my wife and I, we've done that. We did that several times from about 2001, 2002 to about 2009. Then we were able to, we were kind of riding a wave, I think, of when there's a big market correction in around here where it's like, people say there's a bubble in other parts of the country. Here it was more of a correction. So houses just were really cheap. And then all of a sudden they were starting to go up in value. So you didn't have to do as much. Well, in 2009, things sort of changed. And I'd been talking to a friend of mine that his father had rental properties, and we talked a lot about getting into the buy and hold business.
Yep.
And that's when we joined forces with him. I think for me, for whatever reason, it seems so basic now, buying a property and finding tenants. But at the time, I was a little bit nervous about the whole thing. So for me, it helped to join with a partner, almost to have that confidence to jump off the cliff together, I guess. I figured if I was going to go down, I might as well take someone with me.
Yeah. Yep.
And so basically, we ended up buying a side-by-side duplex, which we still own today.
Mm-hmm.
And we just ended up, we bought it, and one side, we end up keeping the tenant. He's been there for 20 years now. I'm the third owner of the building.
Awesome.
And on the other side, he agreed to a rental increase. And he agreed to a rental increase, and other than safety issues, we had to do electrical upgrades and whatnot. Mm-hmm. Anything cosmetic, he agreed to keep it as is. So we thought, okay,
beautiful.
The other side had a tenant that seemed kind of sketchy.
Yeah.
And so we asked for vacant occupancy at that time. So the close took a little bit longer than we originally wanted it to. But we ended up closing on the property, and on the day of the close, that tenant had not left. So the current landlord at the time actually kind of forced a move out for her. He hired some guys. They came, took all her stuff, and put it in storage. And so we ended up buying that place. We renovated it. And I had no idea what I was doing, but I placed a ad on Kijiji to get a tenant. And I did not have a tenant screening process, I would call it. I knew I had to check background and stuff like that, but I didn't. I'm embarrassed to say this now because I'm such, a big advocate on credit checks and background checks. But at the time, I didn't do a whole lot of other than checking references and past landlords and the regular stuff. I didn't do a credit check, but I managed to get a good tenant set up. But one interesting thing that I found was the first response to the ad I placed on Kijiji was from the tenant that was forced to leave. Oh, okay. And so I had a hate email. So here I'm brand new. I have no idea what I'm doing. Yeah. Get my first place. The first response from the rental ad, I should have saved it.
You should have.
Was so this is why you kicked out a single mother and her 2 children so that you could take over the place and get way more for rent. And she went on to a big rant about how she's homeless, and I thought, wow, that's
what a way to be introduced and welcome to the world of being a landlord, right? That if I could sum up that, it's unfortunately that's what a lot of the outside people, that's how they perceive landlords. Yeah, it's like we are these bad people, and we're coming in and we're kicking people out and we're doing these things, and it's the bane of my existence. I hate seeing situations like that, but I can probably see that would have been a difficult situation to be in when you're first introduced to a new property, right?
Yeah, exactly. So
wow. So going back a little bit, so I can envision it. You're driving around, you're experiencing the flips with your parents, which is awesome. I grew up, my mom was a property manager for 35 years. So that's kind of how I came into the business. So from the time I was born till I was 16, we were the live-in superintendents of a building. Again, I can remember at 8, 9 years old, picking up rents, cleaning the halls, mowing the lawns. So from a very early stage, kind of like you were, I got that taste of real estate and what does all this mean, right? So at what point, before you bought the property, did you do any formal education? Did you, kind of books did you read? real estate investor groups, or how did you go from, driving around looking at flips to really being quite serious from an educational standpoint?
The interesting part, and it's kind of funny because I'm kind of putting together a course to help people and stuff like this, helps people find out the truth. But really, it was mostly through talking. Now, mind you, our partner, his father was into rental properties. But most of my education came after. But one thing that I find that's kind of interesting is that when I started reading like some of Don Campbell's books, but I'll go into how I got into all this. But anyways, the long and the short of it, if I had read all the information that I did after I already jumped in and took the plunge, I may have been afraid to plunge in the first place.
I agree.
Start reading horror stories and all this stuff. Because I looked at it this whole, and it might seem sort of holistic, and I still abide by this theory, is that I thought, well, if I provide good homes for good people, and, I want to do the best. Like, I want to provide a quality product. I want to, like we try to provide, we take a different kind of customer service approach to our whole landlording property management business. So I was looking at all the sunshine and lollipop side of things. And for the most part, we do have great tenants.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think the media, and whether if it's through magazines or different outlets that you see out there, it's usually from one extreme to another. It's either complete horror stories, or it's these, they try to pin it up to be a get rich quick scheme, right? And I think it's safe to say that you and I know better that this is definitely not a get rich quick scheme in any way. And it's not always horrible. There is a tremendous amount of positive, aspects to being a landlord, to dealing with tenants, to buying and selling real estate, or else, nobody would be in it if it was such a nightmare, right? Yes. So I agree with that. Yeah.
So one thing was interesting where I lived. I happened to buy a house that was next door to a guy that was just getting into real estate investing as well. And he told me about a group he was a member of, which it seems odd now because it grew quite big and then kind of branched off into some different divisions. But we were meeting at a bar in Bedford, and it was Richard Killen-Payne that put the group together. I don't know, you probably have met Richard before. And he started a little real estate group because he was getting into real estate and couldn't find anybody. So we used to call it our monthly therapy session. Through that group, like joining a real estate group, if there isn't one, I mean, I can't say enough about the people that I've met that have helped me and still do help me in that group, just meeting all sorts of people.
Yeah, absolutely. Richard's a fantastic guy. I met him on several occasions. He's big into RAIN, into the Real Estate Investment Network. We've talked on a number of times the importance of, the meetup group that he started down there. Where I live, we have something called RIO, which is the Real Estate Investor Organization, I think they call it. Monthly meetings where, like-minded individuals get together, talk about real estate, talk about shop, swap deals. And, it's amazing what you can see that come out of that, right? That can come out of that. So that's really cool. So back to your first deal. So a duplex, you came in with a partner. Talk about a little bit about the structure. Did you guys buy this on your personal name? Did you create a holding company? And kind of how you financed it? Kind of maybe a little bit of the financial details of how all that worked.
That's an interesting point because that was our first hurdle when we what had happened was, so we formed Ford Nova Group. So we
right away
company.
Okay.
And so I went to the bank that had given us our mortgages for years for all our other projects.
Yep.
And went to see a guy there, and I said, okay, here's what we want to do. We want to buy another place, but we're going to bring in another partner with it, and we want to do a put it in a company name, right? Not our name.
Right.
And the bank, this charter bank, they said, no, you can't do that. It's not going to fly. And it's like, well, we're going to sign as guarantors anyway. I mean, there's not, they're going to come after us if we don't pay. Just for accounting, keeping it neat and tidy, we just want it in the company name. And they were like, no. They're like, no, it's just not going to happen. So I was like, okay. So then I said, do you want anyone that will do that for us? And so a couple of days later, sent an email. It's like, no, check with other people that we affiliate with. Just not going to happen. So I thought, wow, that's kind of strange.
Yeah. So
then I was like, oh, who can I use? And then I ended up meeting my current money man, Scott Bentley. He I was trying to find other real estate investors that had done some deals like this. So I remember going and meeting him, and sat down. My partner, he still lives in Alberta. He flew in for the meeting. We go and meet. We figure, it's going to be a big hassle, and we go in. And at the time, rules change, of course. He said, I said, so what do we need to buy this and put in the company name? He said, 5% down. I was like, no, you don't understand. We want to put it in the company name. Like, what's going to be the big hurdles we have to do? And he's like, 5% down. And he's like, you bring the money to the table, and we'll let me worry about the finance.
We'll get her done. Nice.
So I said, what do we need to buy the next property? And he said, well, 2 units, 5% down.
Nice.
And I was like, okay then.
Yeah.
So after that day, that's when we went shopping. So
beautiful.
It's interesting with lenders that we've dealt with over the years, because we've had mortgages with we had some bigger properties stuff, because we're forever, maybe I'm addicted to selling as much as I am buying, but everything's for sale, by the way.
Absolutely.
So we've bought and sold some properties, but working with one particular mortgage broker is what I would highly recommend.
Right.
Because he has all, I call him, like, well, I'm going to say his name, Scott Bentley. I mean, I'm sure that other people have used him. If they don't, he's kind of like he finances a lot of real estate he does financing for tons and tons of real estate investors.
Yep.
So he's kind of a specialist.
He knows the game.
In that.
Yep.
Yeah, he's a specialist in that area. And I call him kind of like a financial architect. He's like a portfolio architect, because
beautiful.
He uses the right lenders for that particular project. So when we bought some bigger buildings, certain banks have more of a thirst for the commercial business, whereas certain lenders are, because we have everything from, we've bought single family homes and that. And for example, there's homes that are in my wife and I's name that, we have them all with one particular banks that seems to like us right now. So and that's a great tip, Mike, in terms of dealing with a broker. I always, when I'm dealing with new investors and we're chatting, I always tell them, make sure, whether if it's a realtor or a broker, make sure that you're dealing with somebody that has some experience with rentals and everything in that entire world. I've seen people go through a lot of pain when they're going through a realtor. They're trying to evaluate a 4 or 6 or a 12 unit building, and that realtor has never bought or sold a building before. And the same thing goes for the financing end of it, right? There's going to be some different aspects to
it's much different buying a 4-unit than a 6-unit, right? Residential versus commercial. The rules are all different. And the guidance that they can provide, right? It's nice to have.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it's critical. Like, cause they have to put together, and just with your whole portfolio of how they're going to structure it and what your intent is, and they have to know your goals and all that sort of stuff. And they got, quite frankly, they got all your information. So it's like
easy.
Yeah, it's a hell of a lot easier. Like the last place we closed on, I mean, they needed basically a phone book of information because the lenders are a little tighter on dotting their I's and crossing their T's. So we had to have current leases no more than a year old, or we had to have verification forms signed by every single tenant.
Yep. We're finding that. We're finding that as well. We get for the number of units that we manage, it's probably on a weekly basis that I'll get owners asking for different details, and I can always tell when they're probably out buying stuff, right?
Yeah.
Because it's very easy to tell. I need leases, I need all last year's expenses, and even though they can get it all within the portal that we provide them, a lot of them still come to us and kind of ask us for advice in that. Yeah. Okay, so you did incorporate, which is great. For anybody that's out there that's going to be watching this, buying your first property, a lot of people tend to put it under their own personal names. I can tell you from experience, from what I felt, I did that, and I'm kind of still paying for it in terms of the tax perspective, right? Yeah. If you're in a higher tax bracket, and you own a rental property and it's under your personal name, well, you got to put it under your income tax return. And unfortunately, the mortgage payments on a rental property are not tax deductible. So if you're getting, if you've made an extra $50,000 in income from that property, you're probably going to be able to write off half of it towards expenses, mortgage interest and all the different expenses, but you're going to be left with a big chunk of it that you can't do a whole lot with it. Yeah. And you're going to be paying a pretty high tax. So if you can incorporate, kind of like, I voice what Michael says, if you can incorporate from day one, I think that's the better structure. And then liability and all the other benefits involved, right? Yeah. Okay, perfect. So you got your first duplex, you're with a partner. I think you kind of already told us your first landlord, your baptism by fire, which was a nasty letter. How did kind of the first 3 to 6 months go in terms of being a new landlord? Did you face any other challenges, or was it pretty smooth riding? Or
one challenge was what we had done was, and this can be what a lot of people do, I'm sure, but we ended up, because we had the opportunity to close on another property, instead of renovating the first one and then waiting and buying the next one and then renovating that and moving on, we thought it'd be more fun to have 2 renovation projects on the go. So we ended up buying another set of over-under flats, closed on them within 2 weeks of each other. Wow. And for me at the time, it's kind of funny because as you learn on the journey and you learn how to deal with contractors, and I mean, I got a fantastic team of people like contractors and tradespeople that help me now. Yep. But at the time, I really didn't. I had some, like I had a general contractor that I've been using on all my projects before. But then when I said to him, oh, by the way, I want to have 2 pretty good sized rental projects and I need them done ASAP because I got money on the line here. I need revenue out of these properties. So I ended up kind of pulling my hair out because, I found that there was a few construction delays. And I can remember, my wife and I standing in a place that was meant to have a tenant in it in a week and a half, and we're standing there and The bathroom has no toilet, no vanity, no, it's all gone out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
yeah, construction timelines are tough to keep in line.
yeah, so I was a little optimistic on my timing of the construction project, but as construction tends to happen, is you end up doing more than you originally expect. So
always. Yeah.
So that was my first bout of what I would call some stress. Right now, it's like, I'd beg for that day because that would seem like nothing. But
yeah. So when you were fairly educated in terms of the systems, because I guess when you first become a landlord, some of the key items is setting the groundwork for your tenants, how to contact you, get in touch with you for maintenance requests and stuff like that. Rent collection, to make sure that you have a process in place to where, the tenants, you go pick up the money from them, or they bring them to you, or you set up, post-dated checks and all that stuff. Were you guys out of the gate? Do you think your systems were pretty good? You were kind of set in the right direction from day one, or does that take a little bit of time?
Well, what's interesting is that my first tenant that I ever one of my first tenants, because I ended up, of course, with 4. But but one of my first tenants she was like, because I was always thinking post-dated checks, right? Yeah. And my first tenant, and this might seem really kind of strange, she had been doing email money transfers with the previous landlord.
Yes.
And so she goes, "Oh, can I do email money transfer?" Yeah. And I was like, yeah, I've never done an email money transfer. Like literally, I do them all the time now, but I'd never done one before. I was like, yeah. She goes, "Oh, it's real easy. I'll teach you how to do it." So I was like, all right, let's do it. Yeah. And so interestingly enough, I was taught by my first tenant how to collect rent efficiently.
Nice. That's awesome. The email money transfers have been kind of a godsend for us. Yeah. It's eliminated probably, 30% of the cash that we would deal with on a month-to-month basis.
Yes.
It's so convenient, and it's fantastic. Okay. So we got the first, or almost the 2 buildings, I guess, underway. What's next? And what are the timelines involved? So you got your first 2. What was the next purchase, and kind of what were the timelines associated to it?
The next one would have been, so those ones I closed one I closed on September 15th. The next one was October 1st. And then the next one wasn't until April 10th.
Of the next, okay. That's not too bad.
Yeah, into the next year. And that was an over-under set of flats as well.
So duplex.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then and then at that time, the mortgage rules changed. So then you had to have 20% down for income properties. So my thinking was, okay, that's going to up the ante. Yep. So we took the rest for money, and we bought a 6-unit apartment building.
Okay, perfect. So that was, now you're into commercial.
Yeah, so that was, and at the time what was interesting though is because we ended up actually, what was kind of interesting with that deal was we put 30% down, and we so they ended up financing it on just I didn't have to deal with CMHC or anything like that, and it was Bank of Montreal's kind of commercial division, right? So they seem to, they're trying to build a relationship, right? Yeah. So so it was relatively hassle free from the financing side.
Great.
Because of the amount down, they were kind of like whatever, right? Like they didn't require appraisals and all that sort of stuff. I actually had a phase one done.
Environmental,
reasons, but they didn't even require one for that particular project. So
perfect.
At the time.
So going from, how did you find was there a mindset shift in terms of going from a duplex to a 6? Were you more concerned? Were you thinking about different things, or what caused you to make the jump going from a 2 to a 6?
My thinking was, and at the time, and I've since changed a little bit my strategy now, but at the time I was looking for door count. I wanted units. Yep. And because I had a goal for a certain amount of units in a certain amount of time. Mm-hmm. And the other thing was that if I was going to have to put a whole whack of money down, then why put, at the time, like a 2 unit would have been about 200,000. Mm-hmm. And I bought this 6 unit for, it was 257,000 for 6 unit, right? So sometimes it changed. I flipped that property, and it needed work though, right? So it wasn't like, it had a sketchy tenant base, and it needed work. It turned into be different than I envisioned. Mm-hmm. Perhaps I've been spoiled with the 2 unit properties. I should say it's like a higher end tenant, but it's just I really, other than maintenance issues, I had no tenant issues up until this point whatsoever.
Okay.
None.
Good.
Like no one ever didn't pay me the rent or anything like that, or gave me stories or anything, like nothing. Nice. And so when I went to the 6 unit, and it was a C building. Yep, C class. Yeah. Yep. And so it was a whole different thing. Yeah. It was a completely different thing.
I had it. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, no, I was going to say, I think that's when I really, the first night I closed on that on December 30th, and on December 31st, of course, was New Year's Eve, and so when I got up on New Year's Day, mm-hmm. I had 2 messages on the phone. And one was from he was kind of like, but call him a superintendent. He kind of cleaned the halls or whatever and put out the garbage. Yep. For a rent reduction. Yep. And one message was from him, and the other message was from a tenant. And apparently there was some sort of fight. There was an altercation. There was drunkenness, and there was police involved. Nice. And each one of them told me a completely different story, of course.
Big surprise.
And I thought, oh my God.
Yeah,
I am
what did I get myself into?
Officially a landlord. I have a building, and on New Year's Day, like I haven't even, Actually, I had met the tenants that day on December 30th because I went in to do all my new leases. Mm-hmm. So I always do the one-on-one, and we check through what do you need, sort of thing. Yep. Look for maintenance or whatever. Tell them that we're going to have, just to lay out the expectations of what's going to happen. Yep. And if they need anything, like do you have any leaks in your pipe? Like whatever they need, because I'm going to have contractors in. So let's get her done right now and make them happy. And because sometimes people have trepidation when there's new landlords, so you want to set the stage in a positive way. And where the previous landlord had, basically they ran out of oil on Boxing Day a few days before I closed. I think that he had pretty much given up on the building before I had taken over. So right, yeah. But anyways, so I went and I had to write letters on my very first day. I had to write conduct letters and bring them up, and I met with each one individually. I can remember sitting there with the lady. I was like, my first day of you can't give me like a week or something? Like my first day, and you're getting into a fight causing a disturbance in the building? Yeah. And my superintendent guy, who turned out he wasn't so super.
Yeah.
I was like, you're the one telling me you look after the place and you're getting into a fight that involves some keys?
Yeah, it's crazy. It is. I've heard it all, and I've probably witnessed and been part of all of it as well. I to this day, I'm still. It's kind of hard to shock me these days because I've seen so much. But yeah, when we take over new properties, which is quite regularly, you're just shocked sometimes to whether if it's when we're delivering our welcome letters. It can be a complete download of frustration, and that night they're partying and complaints and this and that, and it's like, geez, I got to put the hammer down already. It's like, give me some grace time, right? Let's get to know each other and feel each other out, and you're already breaking the rules. But that's just part of the business, right?
Yeah, that's when I felt like I was a landlord.
You're a landlord, yeah. So you bring up some interesting things that I want to kind of touch on. So as a real estate investor, and I just got back from a lunch with a friend of mine here that's looking at investing in real estate, and he's asking me different tips on how to navigate things. And we talked a little bit about demographics. He's completely virgin. He hasn't pulled the trigger yet on a multi-unit. And, he asked my opinion about something, and demographics came up. So I asked him, I'm like, Dave, what type of properties and what type of tenants, or actually what type of tenants do you want to deal with? Do you want to deal with a C or a D class low end type tenant, which some of them are fantastic, some of them are not so great? Or do you want a high end upper class, or do you want kind of a B grade, a middle of the road, right? Because once you figure out the type of tenant base that you want to deal with, it's going to enable you it's going to make your choosing properties a little bit easier, right? In terms of what you want to buy. So I know for us, we manage everything, right? I manage really nice, brand new, super high end to not so high end. So that gives us a tenant base that's all over the map as well. So I've always been, a big proponent if you're a new real estate investor that, finding that middle ground, B class type building, class tenant is probably going to give you the less headaches. I don't know, maybe if you can comment to that, if you agree, or kind of that's your philosophy as well.
Yeah, no, I absolutely 100%. And I think that's why, because I whenever I'm talking to somebody about real estate investing, I'll say, like, what's your intent? Because a person here in Halifax can buy a 2-unit property, B grade, a nice property, have good tenants, and basically pay it off, and you can essentially retire off of that one property from the income on it, right? And you run a nice home, nice person, and you may end up with a tenant that's, like I said, in one half of one of my duplex. Like, I have a lot of long-term tenants. The one that taught me about email or whatever, she's long-term, and you're getting a good, your nice regular salt of the earth people that work in that. So depending on if you want to get into, if you want to become the Donald Trump type and have all kinds of units, well, that's a different, it's a different strategy, right? And,
exactly.
And I find like a couple, if you're starting out, I mean, just buy a duplex and rent out one half, live in the other, right? Like that's, then try it out and see what you think. Because I run into people that have tenant issues that they think are tenant issues. They're like, oh, well, the tenant called because their tap was leaking or this or that, like basic, what I might consider like basic, well, that's like a issue. The only guarantee about a 50-year-old building is that things are going to break. But they really feel bothered by it. Like it's, some people are just like, no, but that took me away from Grey's Anatomy, and and I have to deal with this, or you know what I mean? Like
That's a very,
you know, I got a friend that manages C buildings, and like, I mean, he was telling me about the yelling match he was having with a guy that's basically squatting in one of his units, and about the busted out windows on another one. And I'm like, you know what? That's like, he's not fazed by it. It's almost like he loves it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, for us in the management business, it's kind of like, I don't, you know, there's no discrimination. A building, a unit, a tenant, a tenant. You treat everybody the same.
Yeah.
I don't go into a $500 apartment and do a crappy paint job.
No.
You know, I'm going to do the same paint job I would do for this apartment that I would probably do for any other apartment. I think that's kind of a general mentality that you got to have. But yeah, I think demographics and a new investor going into their journey, having a good idea, at least at the start, if they want to be the next Donald Trump, then they're probably going to have a mixed mash of every type of demographic.
Yeah.
But at least to kind of keep it in the back of their mind that, you know, the kind of the lower grade type tenants expect a little bit more, you know, in terms of headaches. There might be additional costs, expenses, turnover, and all that fun stuff, right?
Well, one point on that was that what never occurred to me, I guess, was the curveball on that end of it is that, and this comes from my flipping houses, the maintenance and construction side, nothing would faze me. Like, you know, I've had roofs collapse, I've had floods, I've had the whole nine yards. You know, you throw out anything. What threw me for a curveball when I bought that first sixplex on dealing with was the drama issues. Like, you don't realize how much like people live for it. Like in the and some of the issues that we dealt with, a lot of more mental illness issues that aren't properly treated. You know, and that's where we found it really challenging. Like tenants fighting with each other and.
Yeah, the larger scale you go, the bigger the building, you have a lot more commingling.
Yes.
And what happens is the lower class buildings, the reality is some of them may not work and they're home all the time. And if you have a lot of tenants at home all day, all night, they're going to go out and they're going to chat and they're going to talk and they're going to become friends and they're going to fight.
Yep.
And it's the level of management and, you know, babysitting required is definitely increased, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So. Yep. Another part that I kind of wanted to quickly talk about was, so you made the jump from essentially a residential to a commercial type rental property. So
yes.
For those out there watching, so typically from at least where we live, the demarcation point is 5 units. Anything 5 and under is usually considered residential from a banking perspective and mortgages. And then anything 5 and up is considered commercial. And typically, you know, you fall into a different category with the bank. Down payments become different. The way that they finance or that they underwrite the deal is a little bit different.
Yeah.
So one of the points you brought up, which I like, is you're now having to deal with this live-in resident manager.
Yes.
So typically in our world, anything 12 and up, we usually like to have an in-house resident manager, some guy that's on the ground, he's in the building, eyes and ears, someone for a tenant to go knock on a door in case there's any emergencies and anything like that.
Yeah.
Which is great to have from an owner perspective. I love the fact that I have resident managers looking out for me, right?
Yes.
But the other side of the coin is the expense of a resident manager. So typically one of the kind of some of the biggest differences going from residential to commercial is you have an added set of expenses typically. So you're probably now dealing with common areas, so hallways. So you may have an intercom system. So you're dealing with, you know, the maintenance and the upkeep and the running of an intercom system. You're dealing with cleaning the hallways, the common areas on a weekly, bi-weekly basis, and dealing with a resident manager. So all new facets of making that jump from a duplex where you just have two, there's no common areas, they each got their own door, to really essentially an apartment building, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Maybe you can kind of chat a little bit about that in terms of how you found that, or.
Yeah, what I found was that, and I inherited this particular, this first one, I inherited this gentleman. So what he did was, so basically, what I was surprised by was how cheap, in some ways, that they'll work for to do stuff. So what he was in charge of was making sure the hallways were clean, the laundry room, there's a garbage can in there, and making sure, basically it's all swept and cleaned. And there was 2 stairwells in this building. If you can visualize it, I mean, there's many of these little 6-unit buildings. They have back stairwell.
Front and the back. Right?
Yeah. The back stairwell was carpeted, so that all had to be vacuumed. And so he did that for, he would show apartments, but he wasn't really like, you wouldn't have him collect rent or anything like that. So he did that for a $200 a month rent reduction. Essentially, what he was that's what
it's reasonable
doing that for. So I figure, if you're going to get a cleaner in every couple of weeks, they're probably going to charge you $50 or whatever anyway. So it's like, it's not bad, right? And so he put out the garbage as well. That was a big thing. Because there was a garbage bin on the side of the building until some people lit it on fire. But that's a story for another day. And they so he would just basically, he would take all the garbage can. There's a whole bunch of garbage cans in that, and he would take them out. So and keeping that neat, because I'm kind of and making sure there's no like cigarette butts out in front and stuff like that. Like I like things. Maybe I'm a little too fussy, but there's nothing worse than driving by a building there's like garbage everywhere. Like you have to. There's some maintenance involved in looking after the garbage bin in that. So I felt it was kind of good to have somebody on site. But the challenge with this particular guy at the time was, I don't know if you ever seen Leahy from the Trailer Park Boys. When the owner of the park, she would come around and she would be like, he would be like, "Oh, I got everything under control." Like, like I'm your guy. I make sure I'm your eyes on the ground. I make sure everything is awesome. And but Leahy's actually the worst drunken instigator. That's the super I had. Oh,
nice. Yeah, I think I've had a few of those. You gotta be really careful with resident managers, because they're essentially representing you, your building, your product, your tenants, and they gotta fit the culture and kind of fit the atmosphere of the building. The last thing you want is problems from your super, when you're hiring and paying him to kind of take care of things. So
exactly.
Good point. So so that brings up another good point. We've had different cost structures in terms of how we compensate live-in superintendents, whether if it's discounted rents, we pay them, all sorts of different things. One thing that I'd recommend for everybody to kind of be careful for is, even if you're compensating somebody in rent, at least the CRA, the Canada Revenue Agency, still looks at that discount as a taxable income on that resident manager. So if it's all under the table, CRA could go after them up to like 5 years, I believe, and if they haven't paid any tax on that money. So for anybody out there that's kind of paying under the table discounted rents, you should have that discussion with your resident managers to make sure that they're aware, because there was actually a company here in town that over 15 of their live-in resident managers all got audited and they went for 5 years.
Oh, man.
And they all had a lot of taxes to pay, and they weren't happy.
No, I don't imagine.
So now the way that we do things here in our company is they're on payroll. So
Okay.
deductions are automatic and they're taken care of, right? So it's the expectations are set up front. So there's nothing wrong with discounted rents, but you just got to make sure that they know that they have to put this on their tax returns. That's all.
Yeah, which none of them probably do.
No.
So
But
that's a really good point, actually.
It's the fact is, as long as you advise them, and you probably maybe even want to get somebody to sign off and say, "Listen, you've been advised. If you don't claim it, then that's all on you. It's not on me as an employer or the person giving you this compensation."
Yeah, no, that's a really good point, actually.
Yep. So okay, so we got a 6-unit. So I'm assuming from there, did you kind of keep growing? What's the biggest that you have in your portfolio? You have a 12, I think.
That was the biggest building. I kind of gone back into
smaller,
more like 4 units, 3 units, that type of stuff, right? So that's more cup of tea.
Would you say your strategy? So you mentioned a while ago that you would sell anything's for sale, which I think is everybody's general view. But would you classify yourself more as a buy and hold type investor, or do you buy stuff usually with the intent and flipping it within a 3 to 5 year range?
No, I would say I'm more into I'm buy and hold for sure.
Yep. Okay.
It's just we just have we have certain, it's kind of a complicated, well, not super complicated, but we have sort of a business strategy or whatever.
Yep.
Which is, there's certain buildings that are bought either with the intent of repositioning to sell.
Absolutely.
Some properties are built with the intention of fixing up and holding, right? So
I think in any real estate investor's journey, you're always going to be hitting this point where do I get the money to buy the next deal, right? That's often the problem that we face, right? Is these pesky little down payments that we have to make to buy these buildings.
Yes.
So I've always been a proponent of exactly what you said, building a strategy to where you're continuously buying and holding, but you also have a secondary strategy to either a way to make the quick cash, whether if you're doing a flip, whether if you're doing wholesaling, or there's so many different things you can do in real estate, but you need, having a buy and hold strategy, you're not going to get rich quick. You're basically getting, whatever you're getting on your cash flows at the end of the month. Don't expect having a duplex and in a year having enough to go out and buy another one. That's usually not going to happen, right?
No.
So you need these larger cash infusions, and exactly like you say, maybe you buy a property that is it's a fixer upper, and you can flip it quick, right? Make it quick 20,000, 30,000, and then you roll that into either the same size or a similar deal to where you've rolled up, you've upgraded to where the point you're making 50, 60, 70,000 on these little transactions, and before you know it, you have enough to buy a nice down payment on a $500,000 or $1 million type product, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, cool. So what's next? Kind of what do you guys do? Are you still in growth mode? Are you in management mode, or what do you kind of see unraveling in the next year?
We we just closed on our property January 5th. But
did you? Oh, congratulations.
Which actually is kind of one thing that's interesting is because it's something that I've wanted to get into, which is the student housing market here in South End Halifax.
Yeah.
And so what we did was we ended up buying. We kind of did a little hybrid model for an experiment, which has been working out well. We ended up buying a house, which we live in, so we were able to do it with 5% down.
Yeah.
And then it has one section of the house, kind of hard to describe. It's not really in our sort of area where we live, but there's some rental rooms, so we kept those on as well, and they're not really students. Like there's a professor and there's a few professors and some graduate students. Type of clientele.
Yeah.
And so like I said, it's pretty good. Like like by the room, there's just so much more revenue. And right now, just because like a lot of stuff for us is driven by markets, and right now, even though things are really expensive here on Halifax, they're actually coming down in price that are they're at least 6-7 year lows.
Okay.
So
interesting.
And so there's some I think there's opportunity here for a lift on this particular property that we bought. It's probably I'm thinking it's not to get into economic theories or anything, but it's probably a 5-year
plan,
sort of a 5-year endeavor.
Yep. Good for you.
Which the economy still could suck in 5 years. I don't know, but there's a good equity play there. So in my opinion, but
So you're still an active buyer. You're out there, always open to see a deal.
Yeah. So what I'm looking for now is another student property.
Okay.
And I really, I've gotten into a lot of, I'm IPON certified apartment manager, and I've really gotten into the education piece of the business, sort of like the consulting piece, which I kind of like. I like teaching and consulting with people on real estate. So, so we, of course, obviously we manage a lot of our stuff, and so we have experience that way. But it's also good to try different things, because I've never had this. I've never been into student housing before, so this is my putting the toe in the water.
You're going to learn quickly
on that to see how it is, right? So
that's awesome. I know you spoke to me before about the whole educational component of real estate investing. You're working on a book, which I think is awesome. I think that the market needs more good information, good education, mentors for real estate, for people that are looking to get into real estate. I always found, when I started, it was tough for me. I felt like I had to learn everything on my own. And working with newbies and people coming in and then graduating from different processes or different stages of owning, residential rentals. It's nice to have that guidance and help, and sometimes it's nice to be someone to hold your hand kind of through those things, right? Yeah. So I applaud that, and I think a lot of people in here are going to be lucky if they get to work with you. I think you have a good view and a good perspective, and you got some good experience. So all that's gonna it's gonna definitely help in the future.
Yeah,
that's great. All right, so Mike, recap. How can people get a hold of you? How can they see if you're going to put a big release on this book? What's the website, and kind of maybe you can just
I'd say go to landlordbydesign.com.
Okay.
And you can just direct contact information to me. That'd be my primary website. My other website, if you want to find more about our real estate investment company, it's fortnovagroup.com. And that's the whole company that has, of course, our real estate portfolio in it for the most part. And then the Landlord by Design is what we're rebranding to kind of separate the investment from the education part of the business. But I've been writing a lot, so I have all kinds of stories on there, which have sort of their story, and I tell the lessons and what we did in those circumstances. So you might be able to go on there and solve a problem that you might be having.
Absolutely.
Or email. I mean, people email me all the time, and
perfect. You're in the social media realm, so Facebook and LinkedIn. They can, Mike Currie. I'll put in your contact information in the context of the series here. So if anybody wants to reach out, I appreciate you sharing your story with us. I wish you the best of luck, and I am quite sure that we'll be keeping in touch and kind of watching your growth and kind of things how proceed. And best of luck with the book. I'm excited to take a look at that. I definitely want a copy.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate it.
Perfect.
Having me on.
All right, perfect. All right, guys. Well, I think that's it for today. We appreciate everybody that took the time to watch the series and support us in this endeavor. So again, my name is Tony Blanc with the Ground Floor Academy, and we'll see you soon for our next episode. Have a great day, everybody.